The N word. Is it really that bad, or are we just using it wrong? Good morning, everyone. This is Matt Long with your Easy Agronomy message for July 23rd. Before we get to today's topic, nitrogen, I have a few quick announcements. First, the meat of today's discussion is a video I recorded with Syngenta Head of Agronomy, Andy Hagenstaller. Nitrogen is one of the areas Andy specializes in, and he has some very interesting and useful information that he'll share with you today. Secondly, if your field or fields were included in the data we discussed today, you'll be receiving a separate email with the complete breakdown on your soil analysis. Third, if you haven't been in the field scouting for western bean cutworm, you need to start now. Control measures should coincide with tasseling, and the economic threshold for treating is 3% if you don't have the VIP 3A or Viptera in your trait stack. Finally, don't forget to mark your calendars for the 2019 Field Day, August 15th at 6:30 p.m. here in Leota at the St. Anthony's Parish Hall. We look forward to seeing you there, and Justin Welsh, Head of Digital Agronomy for Syngenta, and I will be talking about how good yields aren't good enough and where autonomous farming may take your yields in the future. Now to today's video with Andy Hagenstaller. Good morning, everyone. This is Matt Long with your Easy Agronomy update. I'm joined here this morning with Andy Hagenstaller, Head of Agronomy for Golden Harvest and Syngenta, and wanted to visit with Andy today about nitrogen management in our dryland crop. So here about 2 weeks ago, I sampled roughly 50 customer fields and see quite a bit of variability in the amount of available nitrogen. The lowest available nitrate reading we found in top 18 inches was 8 pounds per acre. The highest was 128. And so a couple questions I have for Andy today, or I guess I should back up. About 60% of those samples had less than 75 pounds of available nitrogen. And so a couple questions I have for Andy today is why might we see this much variability in the sampling this spring, and what might we be able to do in the future to better manage our nitrogen in our dryland corn?
Awesome. Hey, Matt, thanks for having me here today. Variability in soil nitrogen is the rule, not the exception, for sure. And what I would say is there's two key things that drive that variability. The first is weather and differences from one location to another in the amount of precipitation that we may have had. In your part of the world, that's probably not as big of a driver as it is in some other areas, but it's still important. The other key driver is going to be differences in soil. So there's a number of properties of the soil that are going to have an effect on how much residual nitrogen we have. The texture of the soil determines how much may have leached or stayed in place, and absolutely differences in organic matter determine how much additional nitrogen we may have from mineralization. So those differences in soil and weather drive it. We have other factors, though, such as differences in removal for a high yielding versus a lower yielding portion of the field, and even things like historic management can have an effect on that. So your second question was, okay, we've got this variability. It's driven largely by differences in soil, weather, and management. What do we do about it? I think a couple things there. The first point you made a minute ago, you said, I believe 60% of these samples were below 75 pounds per acre nitrogen, with the yield goal of, I believe, about 100 or so bushels per acre that you're targeting. We want that nitrogen level to be above that, at or above that 75 pound per acre. In those areas where it's lower, the best management option we can do is to apply some additional nitrogen to get it up to that level. So the first thing we can do to get a handle on that is exactly what you did, is take some samples and understand that variability. At a minimum, I would recommend that we do that at the field level through a composite sample to get an idea for the field. But if we want to really increase the intensity of our management and increase the efficiency of our application, we could even go so far as to take 2, 4, a 10-acre grid sample within a field and actually implement a variable rate nitrogen application based upon that. There's other less intensive ways that we could implement a variable rate application. Let's say that we took that composite sample and we found that nitrogen level was below that 75 pound per acre threshold. Then at that time, we could use things like soil maps or aerial or satellite imagery to get that variable rate application if we didn't want to go out there and collect intensive soil samples. And in many cases, that might be the recommended path. The other point I'll make is with the rainfall that I believe you guys have had this year, the reality is 75 pounds per acre might not be enough. If we've got an opportunity with available moisture to produce above 100 bushels, maybe 150 bushel dryland crop, then we might be looking at needing upwards of 100 or 125 pounds per acre of nitrogen out there. So monitoring that nitrogen resource is absolutely key. I say there's no substitute for at least some soil sampling. At an absolute minimum, we should be thinking about managing our fields differently. And again, if we really want to increase the intensity of that management and the efficiency of the nitrogen utilization, we could go so far as to do variable rate applications.
Very good. So kind of to sum that up real quick, I feel like some of the points was managing the variability, whether it's on the field level or the subfield level, is one way that we can increase the efficiency of our nitrogen applications. And for a year like this, when we have ample soil moisture, the 75 pounds of nitrogen to produce that 100 bushel crop may not be enough because we may get into yields that are 120, 150 bushel. And so thinking about adding additional nitrogen to your growing plan this year is probably a good idea, especially if we continue to get rains through tasseling and grain fill.
Absolutely, Matt. I totally agree.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun.
Yeah, I'm Matt Long, helping you farm differently.